Hi everybody, and welcome to Campfire Stories with Carly. I'm Carly, the instructional coordinator here at Los Luceros Historic Site, and I am bringing you stories from northern New Mexico. So today we are actually going to discuss a story that happened right here at Los Luceros. So this occurred in the hacienda that we have here, and the hacienda was originally built in the 1800s and has a pretty vast history. But this actually takes place when Mary Wheelwright owned the property. So Mary Wheelwright didn't always stay on the property even though she owned it. She's originally from the East Coast and so would often be over there or traveling the world. And so this story occurs when she was not on the property. In the 1930s, a gang of thieves was terrorizing the county. As described by an outsider, conditions in Arriba County had not changed much since the 19th century. Settlements and ranches were few and far between. Roads were also few and all in poor condition. The sheriff's office, which was the county's only law enforcing agency, had a total of 2 men with no police training and an office that lacked a telephone. The county jail consisted of 2 rooms in the courthouse basement with ordinary locks on the doors. Since there was no heat, criminals could only be locked up when the weather was favorable. Both the sheriff and the jailer were difficult to locate most of the time and appeared to have little desire to arrest anyone anyway for fear of making political enemies. A gang known as the Night Riders of Arriba County found this a congenial situation for a spree of burglaries and killings. Anyone daring to protest had his barn burned, his cattle driven off, and members of his family assaulted. They preyed upon both native Hispanics and outsiders like Wheelwright. It was the beginning of the end for the gang when they broke into Los Luceros while Mary was not in residence and took a quantity of valuable Navajo rugs and jewelry. Mr. Montoya, who lived in the Able Lucero house and acted as caretaker, sent his son for the sheriff, who was nowhere to be found. In desperation, a group of citizens appealed to the governor and attorney general for help and protection. They raised money to hire an attorney and brought in a detective, Bill Martin, to clean up the mess. Apparently, Wheelwright was the instigator and main contributor to Martin's salary, and as she put it, he was the first person who brought law and order into this section of the state. Alice Corbin Henderson kept her informed on the progress of the case and coordinated communications between Martin, Mary, and Mary's Santa Fe lawyer, J.O. Seth. Mary was paying the bills, and she was not shy in offering suggestions on how to proceed. One of the early results of Martin's activities was the arrest of Chamita postmaster on multiple charges of misappropriating money orders. Martin then took him to Los Luceros for psychological effect. When he caught the first 2 members of the gang, Martin brought them straight to Santa Fe in a car he had rigged so that they could be handcuffed to brackets under the dashboard. He conferred with the district attorney at 6 a.m. The judge was called and came immediately to hold a private session of the court in which the prisoners pled guilty. Sentence was forthwith pronounced and the culprits delivered to the warden at the state penitentiary, located at the then outskirts of Santa Fe, by 10 a.m. Eventually, the leader of the gang was caught and brought directly to the state pen for safekeeping. He and the last 3 to be apprehended were tried with the benefit of defense attorneys. Nevertheless, they pled guilty to all charges in a proceeding that lasted less than a half an hour. The leader received a sentence of 6 to 30 years in the penitentiary, but was out in 5. Some of the articles stolen from Wheelwright had been sold in southern Colorado and were recovered piecemeal. A large cache of blankets, lamps, silverware, and jewelry was found buried deep in a cornfield. You guys, this is like the wild, wild west out here. We have people breaking in, bandits, and hiding things in a cornfield. Like bananas that this happened here on this property. As it turned out, the leader of the gang was one Bill McKinley, whom Wheelwright had known as a cowboy at San Gabriel. He was a rough character whom she remembered saying that he couldn't lift anything because he had been shot through the body so often. According to newspaper coverage, McKinley had also worked for Wheelwright at Los Luceros and knew the property well. Like, he worked here. That's so crazy. He had even constructed a gate on the Rio Grande side of the property. One of McKinley's accomplices claimed that McKinley had justified the robbery as getting his own back, since Wheelwright had fired him and beat him out of some money. Several years later, Mary received a violent letter threatening her life. As she tells it, Martin enchanted my small but very Western-loving chauffeur by giving him a shoulder holster and a gun, and telling him if anybody approached me to shoot. Martin soon put Mary on a train for the reservation and took most of her valuables out of Los Luceros. After a short time, he had to remove Staples too, for fear that he would be shooting wildly and hurt someone. Staples, Wheelwright said, had always longed for a real adventure in the West. The author of the letter that created all of this commotion was never identified. What a crazy story, right? That happened right here at Los Luceros. We had a gang of bandits and burying treasure in the woods, and it is just amazing to me that Wheelwright ended up getting her treasure back. Like, they found it in the woods, like that, or in the cornfield. That is so crazy. So thank you so much for joining me on Campfire Stories with Carly. I hope you enjoyed getting in your PJs and getting some s'mores and listening to the story. Thank you so much. Catch you next week.